How's it going, YouTube? Coming in today with another video, and today, guys, the video is going to be an update to the meta. We're going into YCS Orlando this weekend, and it's going to be a lot to talk about. There wasn't a new ruling video that I could put out because there's nothing really exciting going on right now, except one or two things that we'll talk about today in the video as well. So today is just going to be a mash of news and things that are updating for the format. So I do hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you haven't already checked my sponsors over at Imperium, Dragonshield, Gem, Cloud, RW, Grimoire, definitely go ahead and check them all out down below in the description. Also, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I appreciate the support so very much. We're about to be partner on Twitch, which is crazy. Thank you so much. Subscribe to the channel. It's at 30,000. And without further ado, let's hop right on into the info. The first thing I want to talk about is going to be if you thought Crystron and all these other decks were going to be like the best crazy underdog pick, Primite Bishell, this deck is crazy. I played against it several times in testing, and it's rough. There is a massive bestial package in this deck. Cards like Drill Beam, the Trap, which is a Snatch, Steal, and Grave. You can also have just like Lubellion with the Regain and Seal. Just the grind game out of this deck is kind of insane. I like this deck a lot. I think that it's going to be very impactful going forward into the format. But there is a ruling that we need to clarify today. Shoutouts to Josh on this one, and this was actually a thing that came up for us when we were playing because of the fact that this card is worded very weird. Later on, I did find out that it's worded very similar to Little Knight. If you don't know what I'm talking about, this second effect of Lordly Load says that you can special summon a normal monster, but also you cannot activate the effects of special summon monsters on the field this turn. Now, for all intents and purposes, this turn means this turn, right? So you see that and you're like, all right, cool. So like this card sucks because you're just locked and it's not like a rest of turn thing. But when you read something like Little Knight, this says you can target one card in the field or in either graveyard, banish it. Also, your monsters cannot attack directly this turn, which we already know that if you attack and then use SP, you're fine. It's because it's a part of the effect. The also conjunction here allows you to go ahead and use either of these effects past the moment where you've already done the thing that says it would be illegal, i.e. you inflict battle damage directly and then SP banish. You activate a special summon monster effect on the board and then activate Lordly Load. So these are things that are allowed, and you can use special and effect monsters on the field all turn until you use the effect of Lordly Load, because again, it is part of the effect. So the first part of it will still be legal, and then this will just be a lingering part of the rest of the effect that will apply for the rest of the turn. Whether you're playing Mitsurugi, you're playing the Fiendsmith variant, you're playing Pure Ryziel, you're on Malice, just know that it's going to be really popular at YCS to see a lot of Bestials. I've seen people cut down on them, but I've also seen people bring them up to like 5 or 6 in the main deck. And that's kind of crazy. But Bestials really do apply a lot of pressure, especially if you're playing like a Fiendsmith variant. I think that if you are, that you should be really on top of playing a lot of Bestials. I think it's going to be a really awkward because this format alone, I do think that Fiendsmith Ryziel is going to be tied for the best deck, because I still think that Mitsurugi is going to be right up there, right next to Fiendsmith, just because the amount of Bestials that we're going to see. But this format, it doesn't really feel like there's a right answer as far as what you should bring for this event, just because there's not really going to be a surefire way to play through everything that we're going to see. We're seeing Drolls in the main, we're seeing a ton of Bestials, we're seeing Shifter back in the main deck of Malice with Impulse. We're seeing so many things that no matter what you pick, there's going to be a lot of cons. There's going to be a lot of pros, but you kind of have to understand that this format is a format of variance, and you just have to play the deck that's going to get variance the least. And I've talked with many, many people about this already too. We definitely think that this event alone is going to be the event that's won by the least amount of misplays, especially when you're looking at a new format with new decks and new interactions, especially Twins. That card really does make the biggest difference, but even with Mitsurugi, and then you have like the Ether Barrel, there's so many cards right now that just make this format completely different. So if you are picking your non-engine for this weekend, definitely consider Bishells, because I think these cards are going to make a heavy impact. Now, for Mitsurugi, this is another thing that I feel like really needs to get covered. This is one thing where the Ameno is really scary, because if the card hits the board and then you try to activate a card, you're going to have to discard if you want your hand trap to go through. But what if I told you that might not be the biggest issue? So what you can do is when your opponent summons Ameno, you don't really have to do anything to it. You can just wait. So when your opponent summons Duo Drive, and they go Duo Drive effect to search, you can drop Nibiru, and then your opponent is going to chain Ameno, and then you can just discard Nibiru. It'll resolve as much as possible, tributing the whole board, and they won't get a token, and you won't get a Nibiru. So especially if you're on Riziel, it won't lock you out of your X effect, which is really good. So that's something that can really play into your favor. You can do the same thing with the Bestial. So it will resolve as much as possible. So you can target something, they go Ameno, and if you just don't care about the body, you can just discard the Bestial, because the effect will still go through, and their monster will still be banished. So really important information as far as dealing with this card. I said it before and I'll say it again. If your opponent tributes one of the Mitsurugi monsters for cost, you can Bestial it away, it'll be in a new location, and the effect will not activate on a new chain, because again, it is in a different location. We're getting back to a format where the end boards are just Dweller. So this is going to be something where Xyz's Encore and the other outs like Droplet that you just kind of have to play if you're worried about a card like this. That makes it extremely hard to play decks like Mermail, play decks like Memento, all these decks that really do thrive off of having a good graveyard effect go off, you know? And that's one thing where I'm not even playing Tier Limit right now, right? Because there's way too many problems with that. But at the end of the day, Dweller is going to be the biggest issue for many, many decks this weekend. So make sure that you have a game plan knowing that your opponent will summon Dweller on you, and sometimes they'll summon Dweller instead of Detonator. I've seen this happen many times, because if you pass on Detonator against Riziel, Detonator doesn't really do a whole lot. It really doesn't. If you have Dweller, whether you're playing against Mitsurugi or you're playing against the Fiendsmith variant, doesn't really matter. You just Dweller them, and all of a sudden, like, half the interruptions you had to worry about, you don't have to worry about anymore. And that's really impactful. D-Barrier is definitely still just a one of in the sideboard, but I'm seeing even more lists right now that just aren't playing it all together, and I think that's even crazier. There's a lot of other cards that people are going in favor of, things like Mistaken Arrest, which is an absolutely crazy card, Evenly Matched, which is also just very good. These are cards that I feel like are really slept on at the moment, and they're going to be even more popular, because if you're already playing Droll, and then you're going to be playing Mistaken Arrest, now the rest of your sideboard is realistically just Malice Hate. So like even in my sideboard right now, it's like Lancia's, Hunters, and Neolises, right? Like I'm just making sure that I can deal with Malice, because the deck itself, if it doesn't get Lancia'd, it's still like the craziest deck in the format by far. Like if we didn't have Lancia in the format, that deck would be so broken, like they would already be getting a hit. So that's one thing where you really want to make sure that you are prepared for Malice. And in your siding for this weekend, you have to determine if your main deck is built enough to deal with the number one problem for you in the format. For me, my main is just built to beat Riziel, right? Like, Riziel mirrors all day long, I can handle it. My side, completely decked out for Malice, because that's the only other thing that I have to worry about. I do find Triple Tactics Talent way too important right now. I think this is back to being a 3-of in the main deck. This is just a card where if it resolves, you win the game. And I think that's even scarier, because if your opponent is playing Riziel alone, right? Usually it's just Riziel, it could be Malice, but if your Riziel opponent looks at your hand and then someone's Duo Drive, you're in for a bad time. So that's one thing for me too, where playing something like Mitsurugi, it feels really weird if you don't have something like Droll, because if you are just randomly hand trapping me with like Ashes and Veilers and what have you, I'm either talent looking at your hand or playing through 2 to 3 hand traps. I got hand trapped the other day. I put up like, I think it was 3 interruptions through 3 hand traps, and I was like, wow, like this deck is crazy. So that's another thing where you really need to study up on Mitsurugi, because that deck is going to be very, very real going into this weekend. The deck's very strong. I do hope that you enjoyed today's video, as it was just an update to really show you like what's going to go on this weekend. If you have any questions down below, definitely go ahead and ask them. I will be there. I can't wait to meet more of you. It's going to be so much fun. If you know anyone in your local community who does need a deck to play the game, definitely let me know down below as well, because I can bring a couple extra the decks from the card drive to really be able to hand those out and get players playing the game that we all love. But if you ever already checked out my Twitch, Twitter, Instagram, or Discord, definitely go ahead and do so all down below in the description, and then subscribe to the channel. I'll catch you all in the next video. Thank you. I'll catch you all later.